are we going to see in Baltimore a drop off in sack production by the removal of Mike Macdonald's system? I don't necessarily think that that is true or that is going to be the case. But look at Clowney's production before he got to Baltimore. All of a sudden, he shows up here. He gets 9.5 sacks. Kyle
Right.
Van Noy. Now Van Noy in the last 5 weeks of 2022 played spectacular football. Before we took him on in week 3 or week 4 of 2023. He played spectacular football for the Chargers. Someone should have signed him. My suspicion is Clowney and Van Noy didn't want to sign. That's my suspicion. But
Yeah.
as it stands here where we are now, seeing Ojabo look threatening, look very sudden and athletic, like you said, in week 2 was encouraging because I don't say I'm worried that our sack production won't sustain. I am interested to see what happens in Seattle with their sack production and what happens in Baltimore with ours. Just a quick summary of that. Before he goes to Michigan in 2021, Aiden Hutchinson had 4.5 career sacks. David Ojabo had none. 0. When he showed up in 2021, those two combined for 25 sacks. He comes to Baltimore in 2022. Justin Houston puts together 9.5 sacks after everyone thought he was done. We produced 42 as a team. We produced 60 last year with Clowney and Van Noy having career years. To me, I'm kind of starting to see a trend in those 3 situations with 6 different players. Hutchinson, Ojabo, Justin Houston, Van Noy, and Clowney. 5 different players, excuse me. So forgive me for not, being succinct about it. I'm not very good at being succinct.
That is okay. I appreciate your thorough explanation because that is something that we've talked about on this channel quite a bit. Do you think there will be a drop off in production without Mike Macdonald? And now, to your point, more specifically in terms of the players and personnel on the field, do you think there'll be a drop off in sack production without Clowney? That's a question that we've discussed here several times, and it's one that I'm watching. I'm hopeful. And at the start of the off season, I said, yeah, I think there is going to be some type of drop off because we didn't know what was going to happen with Ojabo. We weren't getting any updates. It's just, his timetable to recover, his mini camp, and then they pushed it back to training camp, and it was
Right.
And so I said, yeah, well, I mean, we did. I don't know what we're going to do or how we're going to address the deficit. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's something to watch. A really good, interesting point to pay attention to how the Ravens' sack production and sack total compare with the Seahawks with Mike
Yes.
McDonald. Yeah, so
Yes.
thank you for that. We'll be watching that. Yeah, and
And I
Lee, if
think
you
and I think
no, go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think too, like, and as to relate that to the Falcons game, in a generic, simplistic sense, the more you stop or slow down the run game, the more passing situations you will create. The more, and I guess this is very simplistic, forgive me, the more passing situations you create, the more opportunity you have to create confusion for the quarterback and get to the quarterback. I think if you create an extra 50 to 70 obvious passing downs across the span of a season, you're giving your pass rushers and whoever is getting after the quarterback, you're giving them more opportunity to get sacks from a general standpoint. But the strength of what we had last year, and I have cautioned Seahawks fans on this, and some of them did not like it. You're facing 2 teams, the Rams and the 49ers, who run the ball exceptionally well. And the strength of Mike Macdonald's system, and what I think the strength of the system under Zach Orr is going to be, is if we put you in situations that are known passing downs, 2nd and 8, 3rd and 6, we have such a wide coverage umbrella, so many options. Our players are so well trained that we can give you so many looks that's going to slow down the quarterback's processing and lead to more quarterback pressures and sacks like we want to see. So to see us not slow down the run game against the Falcons, that was concerning because
Yeah.
we would not be creating as many opportunities for known passing downs. If I said that in a way that makes sense.
You did. Thank you. Because one of the things that I have, and several, I call them family members around here, are subscribers, but some of the family members have shared the same concerns in terms of if you had to say what is one weakness on our defense as a whole, what is one? And a lot of people said our run game needs to improve. Our
Hmm.
ability, I'm not run game, but our run, our ability to defend against the run needs
Yep.
to
Yep.
improve. And if that is a weakness for us, we know these teams are out there going to exploit that. If they can see that the Ravens struggle in run defense, that's what they're going to go at. I mean, and so how do we improve on that?
Yeah, I think some of our problems can be handled with non-traditional answers. To be honest with you, occasionally the boundary side run game where I'm watching. I mean, two of the situations in the Falcons game, we're talking about extremely large holes to run through to the boundary out of 11 personnel. And I think people on my channel probably get tired of me mentioning those indicators. 11 personnel run to the boundary. Well, look. I think we're going on offensively for the Ravens this year. We're going to be doing that a lot with Derrick Henry. We're going to be running the ball into the boundary and play action to the field. But that's a different animal. I don't think our D tackles handled a lot of things well in the preseason, and I'm not going to name names because one or two of them are were released or cut yesterday. But there were some situations where, from a defensive tackle standpoint, you saw a pretty big drop off from particular guys being on the field that are going to play a lot now, and particular guys on the field who are apparently no longer on the roster. So I don't see any need to denigrate some of those guys, but certainly some of those guys were a problem. And then when we put Beau Brade in the game and he played safety to the boundary, those things were not an issue. That dude comes downhill and he's going to make something happen now. And so there is an element to that for me about who is that boundary side safety. I saw a different level of trigger. And what I mean by trigger is I'm a safety. I see a read, I go. When Brade was on the field versus other guys who were on the field a little bit more against the Falcons.
Yeah. Okay. I've got some things to keep my eye on. Thank you, Coach. I'm going to be watching for that. But I'm telling you, Beau Brade, that is a very, very amazing player. And I'm so glad he made the 53-man roster.
Oh yeah.
So glad about it. I didn't know if he would. Quite honestly, I didn't know, just because we had so much depth in the secondary for him to contend. But I'm very pleased that he's on that 53-man roster, and I hope he does get some playing time. Last game, preseason, against the Packers. Now this one, from a defensive perspective, Coach, what stuck out to you negatively about the Ravens?
It did not look like to me we showed up to that game with a mentality that I think is required to succeed overall
Yeah.
from a defensive standpoint. Now, that's a very global statement. So you're talking about coaches and players, obviously, when you do that. So that's a little bit of an inflammatory judgment as well, because we don't normally see that, in my opinion. I didn't see the same level of block destruction, meaning willingness to get to my gap or come downhill I didn't see the same level of effort. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
They out executed us, and I felt like I will relate it to Beau Brade somewhat. There was two run concepts that they executed against us early in the game when Beau Brade is not on the field, and then when he was on the field, one of them he had a tackle for loss. The one what everyone recalls where he's downhill right now and he tackles the guy in the backfield, and then another one where he cuts from the backside and makes a tackle. There was a clear difference between Beau Brade being on the field, kind of rolled up in the box as that nickel, versus Pepe Williams, who we've since cut and released. So I think that's part of the reason is that Beau Brade was willing and able to get to that spot. So maybe he can't translate that against starting level guys, but I didn't think we put our best foot forward defensively in that game. I thought Ojabo had one good pass rush. I remember one that was a loss as well. He also dropped out in coverage once against an empty formation. I thought he looked pretty good,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
He did.
So he looked a little more smooth out in that space than I would have thought. I thought Wiggins had 2 really good reps as well. He looks like he's a dedicated left side corner, and it looks like JAD is a dedicated right side corner, which
Yeah.
is what we do in our defense, left and right.
Yeah.
Uh,
It just didn't
Go
seem
ahead.
like we played with any sense of urgency.
None.
That's
None.
I mean, and that might not be the proper football terminology to use, but
Nope. I agree.
I just didn't see us playing like, hey, this is the last game of the preseason. I want to put it all out there and leave everything on the field.
Yep.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I agree. I just
Yeah.
did a film study video this morning before the kids and everybody woke up on Tony Jefferson, that used to play for the Ravens and had an amazing game in Week 3 of the Chargers preseason against the Cowboys. And I don't like I told you earlier, I don't get to listen to interviews or really. I certainly don't get to watch ESPN or listen. Occasionally, maybe I'll listen to 105.7 if I'm driving from one client to another. So I don't know this. So this is just perception. I think it looked like to me, Tony Jefferson showed up that day and was like, this might be the last football game I play.
Mm,
And I don't know that to be sure. I have no
yeah.
knowledge of that. But all I know is he's a 32-year-old safety who showed up and had 14 tackles, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble,
Ooh,
and played like a maniac.
yeah.
Now, this is maybe an unfair comparison. I because my first part of this statement is possibly not accurate. Maybe Tony Jefferson knew that he was going to make the team and he just showed up to play that way anyway. But I don't think we showed up against the Packers on defense
Yeah.
like we were fighting for a spot. It did not. I didn't see it. It wasn't apparent. I do feel like you can see effort. There's 2 plays I'm thinking of where I won't say that there was no effort, but just a little less effort, maybe 92% effort instead of 100. And so I think that game was a little surprising for me. Is it worrisome for me? No, because we don't have any evidence, and we've never seen Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey, any of those guys show up with that mentality ever.
Right.
So no, it doesn't concern me. Now we could see it in a regular season, and then that would obviously have our attention. But that one really stood out. I know a lot of Ravens fans who pretty much stopped watching at halftime, and that's unusual.
Very, very unusual. But I mean, our level of play was also very unusual for a defense. Even when you talk about reserve, second string, third string, even when you talk
Yep.
about depth, we still have a mantra of play like a Raven.
Yep.
We still play defense, hard nosed, tough, physical, sense of urgency, no matter where you fall on the depth chart. That was lacking sorely. I know
Yeah,
there was
and I
not a
thought,
whole lot to take away. There was not a whole lot of positives. But, coach, from the Packers game on defense, if there's a positive that stood out to you, what would it be?
it would be the continued ways that we are deploying Trenton Simpson, and the continued ways that the things we are asking him to do. So he is a young player, obviously. Nonetheless, if you look at the course of the 3 games, the Eagles, Falcons, and Packers, he's been asked to do a wide array of responsibilities, of techniques. He's been good. I think he's been good at most of those. I do think that he's better at being the guy to go attack, go now. When some of the situations where I believe he's being the read man in an RPO, and look, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes all of us we look at a particular play concept and we're like, all right, well, he's the read man. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes we don't know. We don't know the play call. So there's a couple of times where it looks like to me Trenton Simpson is the read man. He's taken off over here, and so the backside slant is wide open. And I don't know, was it a miscommunication with someone else who was supposed to cover it? I can say that it looks like Trenton Simpson vacated that area, but I don't know because I don't know the defensive call. So for
Right.
me, I'm willing to accept that I can't give a summary judgment. And I think Trenton Simpson played extremely well over the course of the 3 preseason games, had some tackles for loss against the run, did a nice job taking on blockers at times. I've seen people, well, I've muted them on Twitter at this point. Oh, he doesn't take on blockers against the run. He's not physical. I just said, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to, so I think he would be besides Nate Wiggins, Nate Wiggins getting out there. Beau Brade, obviously, like, what is there to say? I think he had 9 tackles, 6 or 7 solos.
Yeah.
I saw him in coverage twice, and he looked good. Does Beau Brade meet the standard for what we'll need from a safety? As far as Marcus Williams and Eddie Jackson and Kyle Hamilton, I don't know if he's that good in coverage. I don't know that yet, but I'm excited to see him and Kane out there again. Those two guys, and we got a cameo from Nate Wiggins that game too, which I thought he looked really good in the situations that I saw him, particularly in coverage.
Yeah. I'm excited for sure. I have some question marks, but I think every team has question marks going into a regular season because you realize that
Hmm.
your roster is quasi set in stone, but
Yep.
changes can be made at any point, at any time.